Hi everybody, welcome back to Explaining Acro. I'm Cassandra and this is Ben, and today we're going to be talking about one of the most foundational skills for standing acrobatics, which is the foot to hand tempo.
As a base in standing acrobatics, pretty much every dynamic skill that we're doing is some variation of a push press. We like teaching the foot to hand tempo as one of the earliest examples of this for a couple different reasons. It's relatively stable when compared to something like a hand to hand, and it gives both the base and the flyer a job to do. We have this idea of compressing a spring and exploding up that we find can be expressed pretty easily in foot to hand tempo, and it's something that we can get a lot of reps in relatively safely.
We like to begin with foot to hand tempos rather than hand to hand tempos or reverse foot to hand tempos. And this is because foot to hand is more stable and allows us to get more quality reps and really practice this technique. If you'd like to see hand-to-hand tempos or reverse foot-to-hand tempos in the future, let us know in the comment section down below and we'd be happy to cover those. Although these are foundational skills to be practicing, there are a few prereqs that we recommend you being comfortable with before trying this. Flyers and bases should both be comfortable with standing foot to hand, and bases you should be comfortable with pressing in an L base position.
When generating power in dynamic acrobatics, sequencing is really critical towards success. If the timing is a little bit off, then it's going to feel super heavy for the base and kind of unstable for the flyer. Whereas if we get it just right, it's going to feel effortless, things are going to go really high, and there's going to be a lot of power that we generate. In order to really understand how this kind of sequence of events works, I like to think about the metaphor of a spring that is formed by the base and the flyer. So if we have a spring and we compress it, in general, the top is going to move first and then the bottom is going to get compressed. However, when the spring expands, the bottom is actually going to start to move first, and then the top of the spring is going to move afterwards. In the context of a foot-to-hand tempo, that means the flyer is going to squat first, then the base is going to come down a little bit afterwards. Once we've kind of reached compression at the bottom, the flyer is going to keep their position, and the base is going to initiate movement by starting to stand up. After that initial movement by the base, the flyer is then going to start extending the legs and almost thinking about jumping. When you get this right, the skill should feel almost effortless.
As a flyer, I am thinking about pushing the base down as I go into this quarter squat position. And in this position, you want to really make sure you're engaged, and if someone was to come push on your shoulders, that you wouldn't collapse under that pressure. And this is for a few reasons. The biggest reason being that the base is going to be pushing their arms up, and you need to make sure that you can meet that force equally with your legs. Otherwise, they're going to push you off your center of mass, or your legs might buckle. And this is just stealing that power from the base. Flyers, once we're in this activated squat position, we're gonna feel the base start to push back up, and that is our cue then to stand up. And when we stand, we wanna make sure we're standing strongly, straightening our legs, and extending our hips into a standing position.
Before we jump into doing drills on people, I think it's helpful to just kind of watch your partner and mime through the movements that we're going to be doing. So as a base here, I'm gonna be waiting for my flyer to start to squat with my hands up. And then as they squat, I'm gonna think about pushing my knees out and keeping my chest pretty upright. This isn't like a quarter squat or anything like this. This is like a push press. So I'm doing this quarter squat. Once I see my flyer stop moving, I can think about standing up through my legs and letting that power from my legs translate into this initial movement off of my shoulder. And then I follow through by extending my arms.
So now that we have our arms established, flyers, we are going to start in our foot to hand position with the arms up. And we are the ones who initiate this skill. So together, the base and flyer will take a breath. And then we start to bend in this activated squat. And we really only go to a quarter squat because we want to make sure our center of mass is staying where it was in the foot to hand. So we have our quarter squat, our arms are slightly bent, and as we feel the base stand back up and push their arms, we stand up and straighten our arms.
So in order to mime this, I'm in my starting position, Cassie's in her starting position. We're going to breathe together and then she's going to initiate.
As you can see, flyers, we are kind of staying in this squatted position for a good amount of time because we need to wait for the bases to finish their squat and stand back up. And that's why it's really important to be in this engaged and stable squat as we hold it.
Breathe together.
Flyer squat.
Base squat, base up.
Flyer up.
Now that we understand roughly how the sequencing works, we can start by practicing in an L-base position on the ground. This is really nice because the flyer is much closer to the ground and this has a much better safety profile. You can absolutely work with a spotter here as well if you want to. It's just the same as spotting a foot-to-hand press. So in order to get started with this, we're first going to have the flyer get into an extended foot-to-hand. The reason we're starting an extended foot-to-hand is because as a base on their back, bending my legs doesn't really do anything. So by having my arms extended to start, I'm able to bend after the flyer bends in order to better mimic that tempo. When we're doing the standing tempos, we're going to be starting with our hands low, and we're going to be bending with our legs.
Flyers, a good thing to practice too here is practicing just some movements of squatting and standing up. And this is just to get comfortable with moving up here because our squat is going to have some movement and we want to make sure that we're confident with that.
Now for the tempo itself, as a base, I'm going to start with my arms straight and wait for the flyer to squat.
So flyers, as we practiced earlier, we bend down, arms go out.
As she starts her squat, I start to bend my arms a little bit afterwards. She's holding this really strong position, and then I'm starting to press.
And flyers, we stand up at the very end, taking the power from the base.
Now at full speed. Very nice. Now, if the base starts to bend too soon, it feels like it's dropping for the flyer. Similarly, if the flyer is not tight at the bottom, all that energy gets stolen.
Flyers, in this drill, it's really important to have this activated squat and just be mindful that our feet are going to be coming out a little bit as the base lowers. So not only do we need to be activated pushing down, but we might also need to do a little bit of pulling in to help keep that stability for this drill.
Bases here, we really want to make sure that we're controlled the entire time. We're definitely trying to move powerfully, but we're not trying to throw our flyers off of us, and we're not trying to do a release right now. We're just trying to get the sequence right.
And as we've talked about and as we saw with some of those examples, this skill, the most important part is going to be that connection and staying predictable and connected the whole time. There shouldn't be this dropping of the arms quickly as Ben showed, or the flyer being loose and wobbly as it goes up. We're losing connection and that's going to take away the power from this skill. As we talked about earlier, flyers, it's really important we keep our center of mass over our feet when we bend. Sometimes we see flyers bend too far forward, like this. Or they set their butt too far back and then their heels, the weight goes to their heels. So here's too far forward. Or too far back. As you can see, the skill is still possible with those problems of move too far forward or too far back, but it becomes more dangerous as we start to stand up and start throwing these skills because now they're unpredictable and they're going to be going away from the base rather than straight above them.
Once these L-based tempos are starting to feel good, we can start to work on the standing versions. For this first example, we're actually going to start with the flyer just standing straight, and all the movement is going to be coming from the base. But first, a quick word on safety. For this progression and the rest of these standing foot-to-hand progressions, we highly recommend that you are working with some form of spotter. Spotting lines would be ideal. However, if you have a really tall and competent friend or multiple spotters, you can do this out of lines. Once these start to be comfortable in your practice, they're actually become quite comfortable to do on your own, but the flyer's head is pretty far from the ground. And if you haven't done things like this before, you can have some pretty catastrophic results. So please use good judgment and take this seriously. So bases, as we're getting ready to do this with a person, this is basically just a push press. If you haven't done one before, definitely look up a video online, but briefly, I'm starting with the bar at my shoulders. I'm thinking about pushing my knees out and keeping my torso upright, driving with my legs. As you can see, even without using my arms, the bar is going to be driven off of my body just from the power of my legs. For this first drill, this is all that we're doing, but eventually we're going to be following through with the arms as well. Importantly, bases, As I press, I'm thinking about leaning my chest forward and keeping the weight over my center of mass. I'm not leaning back in order to look at the weight. In general, that's one, going to be a little bit harder. And two, it's really difficult to maintain my wrist angle as I can do that. And it's going to tend to throw the flyer behind us or otherwise off balance. Bases, if you've only ever done static things before, it's really helpful to start with just this drill. So we're going to be standing here. I'm not going to be pressing at all with my arms. All this power is going to come from my legs. I'm going to push my knees out and then just extend my hips. I'm going to allow my arms to do whatever they want to do, but I'm not actively pushing. And then I'm receiving and catching with my legs.
Flyers, we're just holding shape here, just so that the base can kind of get this movement down.
So these tempos that we call bumps are a nice way as a base or even as a flyer to start getting comfortable moving dynamically from a standing foot to hand. All that's happening is the base is bending and straightening their legs and allowing their arms to basically do whatever they want to do. They're not really pressing up. However, on the receive, it can be nice in order to like slow things down with the arms, allow them to the hands to get back to the shoulders, and then receiving with the legs. If you receive too fast with the legs, it can be a bit bumpy for the flyer. Once these bumps are feeling good, we can start by moving on to the full tempo. Bases, this is exactly what we talked about before. Push the knees out, allow the flyer to initiate the movement, stand up powerfully, straighten the arms. If you want, you can definitely pause up at the top, but for the first couple, I recommend bringing it back down. We want to be controlling the flyer's weight with our arms. Once our arms get to our shoulders, we can then start to receive with the legs. If we're receiving with the legs too soon, we don't really have anywhere to go, and it can be kind of a hard landing for the flyer.
Flyers, just like we've been practicing, we're gonna put the arms up, we're going to take that breath together with the base, and then we bend into that activated squat. We hold that shape in a tight, engaged position. And then as the base stands up and presses their arms, we push back down, extending the legs and hips, and thinking about a slight jump, but we don't want the feet to change. We want to keep the feet at the same angle so we don't jump off of the base's hands. And once we've extended and the base is bringing us back down to catch us, flyers, we want to really hold that shape as we try to find balance again. The more wiggly and moving we are, the harder it's going to be for both of us.
So again, we're going to breathe and she's going to initiate. Another. A couple of things that I want to talk about. So first, on the receive, I'm allowing my legs to split a little bit in order to get some stability kind of forwards and backwards. So I'm finishing my press, but then for me, I step that right leg back, and then I'm in a position where I can really get under and absorb that flyer. Again, I'm really making sure that I'm controlling with my arms as much as I can before I use my legs, because if I drop my legs too fast, it's going to be a bumpy landing. The other thing is I'm making sure to let the flyer initiate the movement. And if I don't feel like I can really push into the flyer, I'm not going to actually do the skill. Flyer's head is far off the ground, so it's better to err on the side of caution and make sure you're keeping everyone safe, even if you're working with a spotter.
This is an exercise that we recommend putting into your regular practice. It's something that we touch often when we are acroing together, because it's one of those foundational skills that is going to lead to those bigger skills. And this is one that reps really matter. The more that we can get practice with these movements, the more confident we can become as bases and flyers, which makes the biggest difference in this skill. I know for me, when I get up there, if I'm confident, my pathway is that much more smooth and powerful versus getting up there and feeling uncertain. The base can feel the uncertainty in my lack of engagement and just the pathway I'm pushing. So we recommend just repping these out, really getting comfortable in them, and it's gonna unlock so much for you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, we'd really appreciate it if you'd leave us a like. If you're not subscribed already, please do so that you can get notified of our future videos. And as always, if there's anything that you'd like to see us cover in the future, leave a comment for us down below, and we'd be happy to do that in the future. See you next time.